Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
That one hurt. A good day to you all, and welcome to a special to-go edition of the Real Chili Podcast. My name is Brian Henry, and I am exhausted. As is the rest of the Real Chili Podcast team, hence I am flying solo here today. The entire contributing group was in Milwaukee this past weekend for a little reunion fun and our opportunity to say goodbye to the Bradley Center. Rest assured we all had a great time, but we are certainly paying the price for trying to pretend like we're 22 years old still, which we definitely are not. But even after cross-country flights and a miserable first day back at work, we did not want to deprive you all of a quick reaction pod, as I have my thoughts on what happened on Saturday. So let's get into it. First off, great atmosphere. That's what Marquette basketball felt like on most nights while I was in school from 2005 to 2009. I know I'm dating myself there, but for my final game at the Bradley Center, that was a terrific way to go out. That was the way I experienced Marquette games, and I'm glad the fans there and the students there got to feel that as well. When it comes to the action on the court, Villanova reminded us all why there's a little number 1 next to their name at the bottom of the scoreboard. They played like America's best team when it counted. Because even with how poorly they played on defense, and trust me, they were bad. I'm sure they looked awful for those of you that watched on TV, and they looked miserable on defense in person. They answered every Marquette run throughout that game, and it gave them a chance to win late when they didn't play well and while they were shorthanded without Phil Booth. More on that later. Jalen Brunson dominated that basketball game from start to finish. Every moment he was on the court, he was the best player. More on him in a little bit. If we were 5% better on defense, I believe we win that game. And that's where I get the most frustrated with what happened. That was a winnable basketball game in front of them. And it's a storyline that we've now seen rear its ugly head a few times this season. Xavier, earlier in the year, another elite team coming into the building. Marquette delivered an offensive performance that was good enough to win, didn't get stops. Now, they got a few more stops in this game than they did against Xavier, but it still wasn't enough to do it. We'll get more into that in just a second. And look, I know this was the story for everybody in the building and for all of you on Twitter and other varieties of social media. Fouls definitely played a factor. The refs made some tough calls. I'm not going to disagree with any of you on that, but losing your mind I don't think achieves anything. There's no point to complain. This is what this team does. Yeah, they were on the wrong end of a few calls. That happens. It's basketball. It happens every single game. Now, yeah, it gets amplified a little more when you play the number 1 team in the country, but this is what we do. We send teams to the foul line at the second highest clip in America, folks. 351 teams play Division I college basketball. Marquette's second in sending teams to the line. Our reputation precedes us. Unfortunately, we're on the wrong end of some calls. Let's get into how the game actually transpired, though. I do have some thoughts on how things went down, because I think that's ultimately where we need to live in this. We can get big picture at another moment, but I do want to go through how this went down. In the first half, as I just mentioned, fouls played a factor. Marcus Howard goes to the bench with his second foul, and Marquette immediately responds with an 18-8 run. Crowd got into the game. It was loud. Rousey's hyping people up as he's walking back to the bench. Really felt like there was a moment. Play continues on. Jamal Cain hits a couple threes. The roof of the building blows off. You really felt like they had an opportunity to take it. I want to focus on the last 90 seconds of the half. Andrew Rousey makes a terrific drive into the key, makes a beautiful drop-off pass to Harry Froling. For those that remember, he lays it in. Marquette's up by 2 with 90 seconds left. They proceed to let Villanova go on a 7-0 run to end the half in the final 90. 49-44 your halftime score. Brutal. That, to me, was a huge swing in that basketball game. Second half starts, you come out of the gate. Andrew Rousey quickly erases that with a 6-0 run of his own. And let me just take a sidebar to say, the thing is truly getting ridiculous. I mean, for the love of God, how do opponents keep falling for this? Andrew, I love it. Keep doing it. It should be on every single scouting report. Close out with your feet planted on the floor. And oh, by the way, if you're 6'5" or taller and you close out with your feet on the floor, it's still going to be tough for him to shoot over you. Yet people continue to leave their feet and foul him at an amazing clip and send a great free throw shooter to the line. I hope they continue to do it. Villanova, that was another example of their miserable defensive play. But Rousey did that right off the gate. It was one of 3 that he got in the game against Villanova. Unbelievable. I shake my head and laugh every time he pulls it off. It's fun. The crowd loves it. You can tell he loves it. And it brutally affects the opponents. It's a mental killer because you just feel terrible about yourself after he does that to you. After that 6-0 run, though, and this is where we get back to Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson rips off a 10-0 run on his own. He had every Marquette guard and big that guarded him in this basketball game in the torture chamber from the minute he walked in the gym for warm-ups till the final buzzer. A big reason why he had the success he did was partially his play and partially Marquette's strategy to guard him, which I want to get into. In that second half, Marquette switched a lot of the ball screens on him and ended up having bigs guarding Jalen Brunson one-on-one at the top of the key. Obviously a mismatch. So ask the question, why did Wojo do it? I think it's pretty clear. Villanova is one of the best passing teams in America. They whip the ball around as well as anyone. We saw it in the game in Philadelphia earlier this year. They put 100 points on the board for a reason. Wojo's thought, and I can't blame him for this, let's slow the pace of the game down. If we switch that high ball screen, Jalen's going to let the roll happen, allow that big to come out on him, stand and stare, let his opponents clear out, and then attack the basket. Thought process being, maybe we can get him to miss a couple. Maybe we can challenge a couple shots, God forbid block one, and get a few more stops. Wojo gambled that they could get a few more stops on him, or that maybe he'd miss a few more shots. Well, he didn't. I understand the strategy. I don't fault the effort, but the players couldn't execute it. Plain and simple. And that 10-0 run early in the second half was a primary example of it. 4 times in the second half, Jalen Brunson got layups or got fouled off big switching onto him at a top-of-the-key ball screen. 4. 8 second half points. Big reason why he ended up with 31 at the end of the night. You know, the first time these two teams played, we spent a lot of time talking about how great Jalen Brunson was, but Marcus Howard was even better. For those that remember his performance in Philadelphia, he gave it to Jalen Brunson as often as Jalen Brunson gave it to him and Marquette's guards. That was not the case on this day for Marcus. He picks up his 4th foul with around 13 minutes left in the second half, and it never allows him to get into a flow. Marcus Howard did not score a basket in the second half of that basketball game, and it's killer. He was frustrated. You could clearly see it. I'll give him credit. He did his best to stay aggressive when he was out there. He did not back off, but it wasn't his day. I mean, your best player didn't score a point in the second half. It is amazing. It was as tight as it was. Props to Sakaran, and we'll get to him in a second. He really picked up Marcus's production in that second half. But to not get anything from Marcus, and he had his looks. He had a critical 1-and-1 late that you can't kill him for. The guy's one of the best free throw shooters in the country. He missed one. It happens. It happened to be a critical one against an elite team, but it was killer. Not having Marcus contributing in the second half In a tight game, you just look at it and go, man, that's something you can normally rely on. He wasn't there in this game, and unfortunately they lose it the way they did. Still a basketball game, though, even when Marcus goes out. Marquette rips off a 7-0 run, gets it down to a 1-point game. What happens? Nova responds with an 8-0 run. Every time in this game, Marquette challenged Villanova and got the crowd back into the game. The experience and the poise of a lot of national championship caliber players that Villanova has showed. And props to them. They very easily could have folded in different moments, and they didn't. So that takes us into the final stretch of the basketball game, and this is where I want to focus in on an individual, and that's going to be Andrew Rousey. I want to preface what I'm going to say about Andrew Rousey with this. They are nowhere remotely close to being competitive in that game without what he does on the offensive end. 29 points, 8 for 9 from the free throw line, hits 5 3-pointers. He is a disruptive force on offense. He turns defenses into pretzels with the way they have to run around to find where he is and the way he comes off of ball screens and can elevate and shoot. And of course, as already mentioned, the thing got him to the line 9 times in the game. He was terrific from that standpoint in 33 minutes. But I want to lean on the words of Steve Wojciechowski. For those watching on TV, there was a sequence where, as FS1 commonly does, they get to stick a microphone in the huddle. And at the under 8 timeout, this was very cool to see, they've got a microphone in the huddle listening to Wojo bark at the troops. And the thing that jumped off the screen when you saw that was when he looks to Rousey and says, "You don't have to create everything for yourself. Let some of these guys create it for you." Because he had just gotten a couple buckets off of a Sakar Annam drive and Hauser finding him for an open shot. So he doesn't have to initiate it all. Easier said than done. We know how Andrew Rousey is programmed. All right? He is pedal to the metal from the second he steps on the court to the end of the game. He plays exceptionally aggressively. The guy's a scorer. He's going to put up shots. He's going to be aggressive to get those shots off. As a smaller guy, you have to be creative with how you're going to get those off. But in the final 5-6 minutes of that game, there were a couple examples of where Andrew could have used a little bit of that 5 years of college basketball experience and make a different choice. If you remember, I believe it was around the 5-minute mark. Villanova had a turnover. It was a 5 or 6 point game. Rousey takes off. It's 1-on-4. He puts the ball on the floor, aggressively drives to the basket against 2 defenders, can't finish the layup. In the building, you could just feel the seething from the crowd. You know, he was aggressive. You have to do that to beat the number 1 team in the country, but they could have gotten a better look there. With around 2:20 left in the game, Rousey catches the ball in that left baseline corner, tries to drive it right at DiVincenzo, who's given up a few inches to. His shot gets immediately stuffed down his throat, and there's a turnover going back the other way. 2 critical possessions from your lone senior and your most experienced player, and he didn't make very smart decisions with it. Now, that said, with 90 seconds left, he hits the 3 falling to his left. It was an unbelievably difficult shot that makes it a 1-possession game. So, Andrew Rousey, he's going to give you a chance to win the game, but he may shoot you out of it and make a tough choice that's going to hurt you. And that is kind of how that played out in the final minutes there. Again, I'm not killing the kid. He is the reason they had a chance because of some of the tough shots that he made. But he could have made some better decisions down the stretch, and I think that's been in line with where he's been all season. He can make a questionable choice, and it hurt them here against Villanova. So let's look at that final 90 seconds. Again, a critical stretch of the game. Yes, everybody, Sakar Annam was likely fouled on his catch and attack of the basket with about a minute left in the game. Less than a minute left in the game, pardon me. Not the end of the world, though. Get a freaking stop. Give yourself another chance. You got a bunch of 3-point shooters on the floor. The game's not over. Instead, Jalen Brunson plays one-on-one, misses a shot. Nova grabs an offensive rebound. DiVincenzo lays the ball in. Ball game. Yes, he got fouled. It happens. I don't know if it's just me and I sit here and I don't get as frustrated by refereeing. Calls get missed. They called some ticky-tack fouls on Villanova throughout the game. They missed one there. It was a bang-bang play. Sakar catches that ball driving down the center of the key. Hand comes flying over. It looked like, I'm sure for most of us watching the game in the building, sure looked like he got stripped. You showed the replay. Len Elmore analyzed it incorrectly, saying that he got it clean. He got his hand. But get a stop. Had a chance to go down on defense on the other end and make a play to give yourself a chance to tie the game. They didn't do it. So this one hurts. Yeah, it's against the number one team in the country. We weren't supposed to win, but Phil Booth didn't play in that game. Villanova was lost defensively without him. And there were opportunities to stick the knife in and potentially twist it on the number one team in the nation to give you a signature win at home. It hurts. Marquette's 13-8 now, and it puts a lot of heat on the remaining stretch of the Big East schedule. 0-4 against Xavier and Villanova this year. They were 3-1 a year ago. There's opportunities still out there on the schedule to get the wins you need to get in the tournament, but 4 big ones are behind you. You weren't able to get it done. Plenty of positives to take away from this game, though. I don't want to come away sounding completely like a negative Nancy. Harry Froling, his best performance as a Golden Eagle, bar none. He was aggressive. He was strong defensively for stretches. Got burned a little bit on the pick and rolls, but I'm not going to kill him on a one-on-one with Jalen Brunson at the top of the key. Got called for some tough fouls. I thought the over-the-back call was a little ridiculous on him in the first half. Not going to lose my mind there. That was what we hoped to get from Harry Froling. I'm glad that Wojo stuck with him for long stretches of that game. He played 27 minutes, a career high. Theo John was pretty much a ghost, and Matt Helt basically was out there to give Harry a blow. That's probably the ideal way that this center position plays out the rest of the year. They need Harry Froling to take a jump and play like that in future games to give him a chance to get some big wins. In addition to Harry, already touched on him, we've mentioned his name a few times, Sakar Annam, his best game of the season. Sakar had a challenging job on defense. He had to guard everybody, it felt like, throughout the game. He ended up on Brunson for a few possessions, but he was bouncing around all over the place. And offensively, great back cuts. Props to Marquette's guards and Sam Hauser especially for being able to find him on those back cuts, but very smart cuts when the defense turned his back to him, and he made Villanova pay. And also threw in some great hustle plays. That's not a one-possession game in the final 45 seconds without what Sakar Annam does. I'll wrap it up with this. Marquette's inability to guard, especially in late game situations, cost them again. Fouls took our best player out of the game, and fouls really forced Wojo's hand in the second half with how he was substituting and who could be on the floor. It hurt. You had the number one team in the country. I don't want to say on the ropes because obviously Villanova had the lead for the majority of that game. Even as Marquette pushed it, they pushed back, as we've talked about, with the runs that they made. But you had an opportunity in front of you to get them. They're wounded without one of their studs in Phil Booth, and we let them slip away. So you put it behind you. You move on. I hope the players enjoyed playing in that atmosphere. I hope the students and fans saw the value of what that kind of atmosphere can add. And Marquette's going to have a big one on Wednesday against Butler. Hope everyone shows up for that. We'll talk to you again after that one on Wednesday. For everyone at the Real Chili Podcast, I'm Brian Henry. We'll talk to you later this week.